separate fact from fiction. After a full and impartial and critical examination of all the evidence in the law, and decide if that evidence supported the filing of any criminal charges against Darren Wilson. They accepted and completed this monumental responsibility in a conscientious and expeditious manner. It is important to note here and say again that they are the only people who have heard and examined every witness and every piece of evidence. They discussed and debated the evidence among themselves before arriving at their collective decision. After their exhaustive review of the evidence, the grand jury deliberated over 2 days, making their final decision. They determined that no probable cause exists to file any charge against Officer Wilson and returned a no true bill on each of the 5 indictments. The physical and scientific evidence examined by the grand jury, combined with the witness statements supported and substantiated by that physical evidence, tells the accurate and tragic story of what happened. A very general synopsis of the testimony and the physical evidence presented to the grand jury follows. Please note that, as I have promised, the evidence presented to the grand jury, with some exceptions, and the testimony of the witnesses called to the grand jury will be released at the conclusion of this statement. At approximately 11:45 a.m. on Saturday, the 9th of August, Ferguson Police Officer Darren Wilson was dispatched to the Northwinds apartment complex for an emergency involving a 2-month-old infant having trouble breathing. At approximately 11:53, while still at the Northwinds call, Wilson heard a radio broadcast for a stealing in progress at a market on West Florissant. The broadcast also included a brief description of the suspect, a black male wearing a white t-shirt who took a box of Swisher cigars. Other officers were dispatched to that store. Officer Wilson remained with the mother and the infant until EMS arrived to transport them to the hospital. Officer Wilson then left Northwinds complex in his Ferguson police vehicle, a Chevy Tahoe SUV, and drove west on Canfield towards West Florissant. An additional description of the stealing suspect was broadcast about that time, wearing a red hat, yellow socks, khaki shorts, and he was with another male. As Officer Wilson was attending to his emergency call on Northwinds, Michael Brown and a companion were in a local convenience store on West Florissant. Michael Brown's activity in that story was recorded by the store's security cameras. The video, often played following its release in August by the Ferguson Police Department, shows Michael Brown grabbing a handful of cigarillos and heading toward the exit without paying. As Michael Brown and his companion left the store, someone inside the store called the police. After crossing West Florissant, the two walked east on Canfield in the middle of the street, Mr. Brown directly behind his companion. As Officer Wilson continued west on Canfield, he encountered Michael Brown and his companion still walking in the middle of the street. As Wilson slowed or stopped as he reached Mr. Brown, he told them to move to the sidewalk. Words were exchanged, and they continued walking down the middle of the street. As they passed, Wilson observed that Michael Brown had cigarillos in his hand and was wearing a red hat and yellow socks. At approximately 12:02 p.m., Wilson radioed that he had 2 individuals on Canfield and needed assistance. Officer Wilson backed his vehicle at an angle, blocking their path and blocking the flow of traffic in both directions. Several cars approached from both east and west but were unable to pass the police vehicle. An altercation took place at the car with Officer Wilson seated inside the vehicle and Mr. Brown standing at the driver's window. During the altercation, 2 shots were fired by Officer Wilson while still inside the vehicle. Mr. Brown ran east on Canfield, and Officer Wilson gave chase. Near the corner of Canfield and Copper Creek, Mr. Brown stopped and turned back towards Officer Wilson. Officer Wilson also stopped. As Michael Brown moved toward Officer Wilson, several more shots were fired by the officer, and Michael Brown was fatally wounded. Within seconds of the final shot, the assist car arrived. Less than 90 seconds passed between Officer Wilson's first contact with Michael Brown and his companion and the arrival of that assist car. During the investigation, many eyewitnesses were interviewed by various media outlets. Several others chose not to talk to the media, but contacted law enforcement directly. Witnesses were interviewed by local and federal law enforcement, sometimes together, sometimes separately, but all statements were